Welcome to Mythbusters Dyslexia Edition. My name is Dr. Kathryn Garforth from Garforth Education.
Hi, I'm Faith Borkowsky, High Five Literacy and Academic Coaching. I'm a Certified Dyslexia Practitioner.
Today we are taking the time to debunk some of these myths surrounding dyslexia. Now, this is something that I see time and time again in the classroom. Once they hit that grade 4 or grade 5 level, the intervention stops. And unfortunately, some even schools that are specializing in learning disabilities have moved toward this trend. And they feel, well, they get the assistive technology and the accommodations that they need, and they can just have audiobooks. And, with smartphones and everything, there are so many things that make it accessible, but that's denying them their basic human right of reading and getting the support they need. Because I can guarantee you that no one wants to pull out their smartphone to take a picture of the menu so it can be read to them during a date or an outing with their friends.
Yeah, and look, I see that too. Very common where, once they get old enough, it's assumed that, all right, we did as much as we could, so now here, we'll give you the computer, we'll give you, programs, all different types of accommodations. And the instruction really stops. And it's unfair because sometimes these kids are not even diagnosed until they're older. So then they really have not had much intervention at all. It's only maybe a year or two in when they already started when they're older. It wasn't picked up in K1 or 2. And all of a sudden they're told, well, no, this is what you're getting. And that's it. So unless these parents fight for every extra service that completely drains them, where they have to get parent advocates and a neuropsychologist to be able to do a report, and then they're going in for CSE meetings and fighting for this. It's just so unfair that it has to be that way, because clearly there should be continuous education going on in the upper grades, and looking at this as a spectrum, that maybe they got certain types of skills down in the lower grades, but that's not going to necessarily help them when they have to do research and reports and organize multiple papers for tests. All those management skills that, the executive functioning skills that many of these kids struggle with will definitely surface as they're older. When more is being asked of them, they start to get anxiety and they suffer with different feelings of low self-esteem. We have to support those kids.
Well, and the United Nations has learning to read as a basic human right, and schools need to be held accountable to this right.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for a child not to learn how to read. I guess I think it's, 1% of the population that can't read, but basically any individual who can comprehend language has the right to learn how to read and have the support in doing so. The other thing that's important to mention is it's never too late. So they're saying, in grade 3 or grade 4, oh, it's too late for them to learn how to read. There are numerous cases of adults learning how to read and people going back, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and learning how to read. It can be done, especially if you use direct systematic instruction.
Look, I just had an interview with a principal, Hildebrand Pelzer, and he's all over Twitter, and he and I discussed this. He wrote a book about potential, and that these kids who fail early on are the ones who end up being incarcerated. So I'm sure you've seen him on Twitter. And basically, what we talked about is how could these kids learn to read in prison, but they weren't able to learn to read in school, in elementary school? So, the prison system, the youth incarcerated kids, they are being given the ability, the chance to read at that point. What are we doing wrong in the early grades? What's happening that kids could read and learn from other prisoners even? And teachers who are trained in this with degrees, like I have a degree as a reading specialist. And until I learned how to use explicit systematic phonics instruction, I wasn't reaching kids. And I thought, all right, there are some kids who just are not reachable. But all along, I kept saying, I just really didn't believe that. In my heart, I knew there had to be a better way, but I wasn't taught this in my teacher education program. I had to find this out on my own. But it does beg the question of just thinking about, well, what is it that we're doing wrong? And what we're doing wrong is we're assuming that kids will just figure out the code. And then once they are given this instruction, when they're older or by people who understand how to teach reading correctly, all of a sudden they're able to read. And they missed out on all these years of being readers. So they lost that vocabulary. That's very hard to make up. So even once they start reading as they're older, vocabulary is cumulative. So, it just builds like money in the bank. There's interest. So the more you hear words, the more you use words, you're able to then understand words at a harder level. Many of those adults do miss out on some essential vocabulary.